Okay.
I don't know if there's time for this, but I would love it if we could have about 5 minutes halfway into the class. It's really stretch and get up and move. It's really hard.
You can do it while I talk.
Okay, that's true.
Once I get started, I really don't like to break because I find it is difficult to get a pace back again. Are we running? Can you see the wheels turning on it? On the cassette? All right, we're all set to go. All right, we're going to catch up. We're still catching up. We have this week and next week, and then we'll be really slow going after that. We'll be through with the fast catch-up. If you remember, we have taken the basic ideas of creation from the very beginning with the Absolute and the Supreme Being manifesting in the Absolute. And we talked about the conditions of time and space and of the spirit and matter that fill them and the evolution of consciousness that takes place in it. We talked briefly about the early periods of evolution, which are billions of years long, that are associated with the symbols Saturn period of time, Sun period of time, and Moon period of time. And we said that there were very great rests in between all of them, and that in the Saturn period of time we recapitulated a mineral-like existence and developed the power of will, or the potential of the power of will. And then we moved to the next stage, and we went through a plant-like state of existence in the Sun period, and then after another big rest, we went to the animal-like state of existence in the Moon period. In the plant-like state, we developed the ability to have vital life, and we developed the life spirit, or the ability to have a flowing imagination. In the animal-like state of existence, we developed the ability to feel, emote, and desire things. And we developed the third attribute of our being, the human spirit, which is the thinker. So we were then the willer, the feeler, and the thinker. And we were ready to commence our current period of evolution, which is called the the Earth period of evolution. We said that the first half of the Earth period is symbolized by Mars, and that the second half is symbolized by Mercury. We're just at the beginning of the second half, give or take a few 100,000 years. We're just beginning the mental side of our development, and the passional side of our development is moving away. Our errors in the Mars half were errors of passion, and consequently we had more illnesses that were infectious illnesses that harmed us. And now our errors in the second half are more errors of thought, and they're much more mental, and as a consequence we're more likely to psychosomatic illnesses and to insanity and things like that. So I put together 3 sets of words that unlock principles of the Earth period of evolution. Yeah.
Thinking started in the Moon period? But
No, the thinker. We haven't started thinking until just the Earth period, but the thinker. That is the conception of an individual being as an idea, the idea of selfhood. That seed was planted in the Moon period, though we didn't actually begin thinking. That's what we're going to get to a little bit tonight.
so animals, where are they in that now? I mean,
Current animals have desire and emotion and feeling is as far as they go, though they have benefited from our current evolution in having nervous systems which make thought possible. But the thought that the individual animals have is much more a matter of inductive, picking it up from humans.
So even at the beginning, the thinker happens when you're in human form and not in animal
It happens after you've had the animal-like experience. The being that does the thinking is developed. It's sort of like the spiritual attribute or the spiritual quality always comes after the experience. When experience has sunk in deeply enough so that the essence of it is taken into the spirit, then the spirit wakes up that quality in itself, and the potential is started from that time on. But we're going to have a lot more about this as we go along. All right, then the three groups are concentration, densification, solidification, separation, segregation, specialization, objectification, formalization, finalization, and fulfillment, which sounds like the way we conceive of the cosmos altogether now. This is, in our waking consciousness, this whole concept of densification and things being separate and solid and discrete, and that we can understand them in terms of objects, is the entirety of our existence. In fact, most people in the world think that is all there is. All of what has gone before has, for the most part, been forgotten, which is both bad and good, because it's good in that people forget about previous things and aren't sunk into memories of what has gone before, such that they can't focus on the now and what's taking place right now. It's bad because there's not then a sense of continuity, which is one of the difficulties of the world as we know it now. The sense of continuity is lost. Most people think that the entire experience of life itself is discrete, that we have one shot and that's all there is and that's the end of it. And therefore, as much as we can please ourselves, even at the expense of others, and as much as we can get away with in our own selfish quest, the wiser we are about life. Then something else has taken place. We've begun to externalize, and when we externalize, we invert things and see things upside down, and we have developed an illusion. And in the illusion of our separation, we become isolated and lonely, and we produce a dichotomy that is both introverted and extroverted, and because of having a split attention, we develop error, but we also have independence, and we can interfere with the process of things that are going on our own, and we have errors, which are called sin and such like that. But somewhere, as a consequence of all of this isolation, we turn inward and we awaken. This is very briefly stating some things that we're going to deal with for a long period of time. We start all over. Only instead of starting from the top down, instead of starting with a union with the divine in which we get further and further away, and we become more and more individualized and separate and more in ourselves and isolated and more external, we get to the bottom, you might say, and when we get to the bottom, we turn around and we have an awakening and we have freedom, and we start going the other way, and we work our way from the bottom up, but it's a self-consciousness, and instead of being ruled by the various gods, we do it on our own. And so we have a creation, and we have you might say, an evolution, and the cosmos starts expanding instead of shrinking more and more into a hardened state of matter. All right, that's the rough of what we're going to deal with for the next quite a few weeks, but okay, we've been talking a lot about the fourth stage, everything being built in periods of 4, and we've talked about it with regard to what is called the right-hand rule, in that any time that there is a projection forward of energy indicated by the thumb, around that there forms a field at right angles. And that field at right angles is basically what forms all of the substance that we live in. That's one principle of the right angle, which is the basis of all of the quadrate figures, which is the four-sided figure, and which is the basis of compounding and building and solidifying things. And we're now in the fourth stage and in the fourth period, and it's a very intense, concentrated kind of experience, and in it we're closed off from the Spirit, and we're closed off in a most unique way, that we're closed off from the Spirit so that we have pure experience. There are three basic, let me just skip wait on that. Where we find ourselves completely in matter, we find ourselves completely in experience, and the whole idea is that this is the season. You might say that the different periods of evolution represent different stages or different seasons of evolutionary consciousness. And in the same way that there is a sprouting in one stage, and then a stalking and leafing in another stage, and a flowering in another stage, and a fruiting in another stage, and finally a seeding, and then a quiescent period wherein the spiritual information of the last cycle is brought into the core of the seed to start all over again. Each of the stages represents a special kind of season. And being isolated in matter the way we are closed off from the gods. We're closed off from the spiritual intelligences which would normally directly move us and control us. And this gives us, we have nothing to restrict us from gathering experience. In fact, we've carried it so far that we now have more experience available than we can possibly utilize wakingly. That is to say, we have like 30 channels of cable TV, all of which are beaming out information at enormous rates, and we just can't draw it all into ourselves. So being shut off from the waking experience of the Spirit, and not being guided by the divinities to tell us, or to bring us through the experiences as they will, we are left with a unique circumstance. We're left with the world in a very rich, concentrated sense. It is illusory. The world is beautiful. The world is overwhelming. And the world is so complete and it's so final that you can look at it and you can just say, wow, is this, this is reality. But that is an error as far as the purpose of this current state of evolution that we are in. The state of evolution that we are in is that when you bring something creatively to being a material standalone object, then you're testing the true meaning of it. And so what we have to really, not in a boring scientific way, but if we look at our experience in the external world as it is right now, as a collection of facts. And these facts stand for themselves. Like, we don't have to be told that there's a meaning. We don't have to be led by the divine, but that the facts carry the truth on their own. There is, that's the great illusion, like people who are, for example, people who are very pictorial, or people who are very oriented toward things. They think that the thing is the meaning because it's so obvious. And there's something about the presence of an object that causes us to take it for granted. And that taking it for granted is the illusion of our time. And so the healthy side of all of this is that the beauty and the reality of this collection of facts that we call the world should be such that it fascinates us, and the facts should stand for themselves. And these facts should lead us to seek the meaning. Again, as in all of the mystery wisdom, the big thing is why. Why are things as they are? And so this basically is the problem of our isolation into matter. Now, before going on, I want to take a little side trip, and I want to recapitulate something that I never really got a chance to say. And I want to talk a little bit about the way things stand in the cosmos right now. We've mentioned some of these things before. These symbols here, though they are the signs of the zodiac, relate more to the constellations than they do to the signs as we know them. This is not according to the tropical zodiac, though there is an interplay always between the sidereal zodiac and the tropical zodiac, in the same way that there is a relationship between the houses and the signs, or between a sign and its ruler and such like that. This is a very interesting. This is the true meaning of the word theology. This is the logic of the gods. There are different names that have been given to the different waves of intelligence that have helped us in our evolution. I want to just describe the four classes of evolving beings that are from humanity on up, because they're really quite interesting. The first 7 have a unique quality about them, and this is very beautiful. You might say they utilize the Uranian or the Aquarian principle. The first 7 are to some extent free. The second 5 are to some extent bound or necessitated. They perform a service, but it's a necessity that they perform it under. All right, I want to review them, and I want to you might say that the first 7 there's a great relationship between freedom and creativity. It is a spiritual law that creation makes you free, and that you cannot create unless you are free. And in the process of creating, you are taking something in yourself that you're ignorant of, and you're taking something where you are ruled by the cosmos. And when you take it and you create with it and put yourself into your creation, this gives you freedom, and it separates you from your creation in the same way that we are the creations of these hierarchies. It frees us in the same way that they have been free. But there are various degrees of freedom, and each of these degrees of freedom has a responsibility to it. And that responsibility is such that it seems almost more limiting than it is freeing. The way it goes, these are basically my own meditated interpretations. In fact, almost the whole class is my own. It's not. You'll not find this in most of the books. The skeleton of this is in the books, but the explanations or expatiations have been wonderfully given to me, you might say, by a lot of work. The way it seems to work, that the greater the degree of freedom, the greater the degree of creative intelligence, the greater the degree of responsibility. But the degree of responsibility is such that you can do less directly the more free that you are. Like you might say that what we call God, in the sense of the solar system that we've been discussing for so many weeks now, God does not meddle in the business of humans or animals or everyone else, because it's a violation of the principle of creative freedom. It goes such that the more free you are, the more you can create. But you're responsible for your creations, but most especially you're responsible to your creations. And if you give yourself to something and it begins to take on a life as a consequence of your free creative activity, then you have to allow that being the right to have its own freedom. You cannot create in such a way that you can make an automaton of your creation. The same freedom that is in the creative act is passed immediately to the recipient of your creative work. So, when we come to the most advanced of all of the beings, the xenophim and the teraphim, these beings are so free that they didn't need to participate in any of the particulars of evolution. If they had, it would have been violating. It would be like a wise old man participating in a child's game and winning the game every time because he's a wise old man. It sounds like a wise old fool to me, but and they gave of them, their consciousness was so universal and it was so removed from evolution that when they gave themselves, all they could give was the possibility of spiritual intelligence and the possibility of taking form. So you might say that they made the nest, or you might say they made the possibility of the nest, the stuff out of which the nest could be built. And they did this freely. And there is a principle of action at a distance in time and space. We see it all the time. You see cartoonists take this principle a lot, saying that we started out with face-to-face warfare. We slugged it out with clubs or whatever. And then as we became more intelligent, we had bows and arrows. And we could operate at a distance on our enemy. This is the negative or the downside of it. And now we have a thing that we have an effect that over half of the continent, half of the world away, we can have an effect at a distance. Also, we can have an effect at a distance in time. that we can initialize one activity and then it takes a very long time for it to come to ripeness. The more profound the creation, the greater the distance. So in effect, when the xenophim and teraphim laid the egg, they could leave immediately. And when the, just make yourself right at home if you want to take your coat off, because otherwise it will get warm. When once the egg, so to speak, was laid, then it was laid and all of the consequences came out of it later. So you might say, these people gave so freely, these beings gave so freely that it didn't they didn't have to be there. Their presence was universal, and it was both close and removed at the same time. The next set of beings was also free, and they didn't need to participate in evolution. We've talked about them before. All of the powers of the spirit that we have, the ability to will, the ability to imagine, and the ability to bring out a final conception that are associated with the divine spirit, the life spirit, and the human spirit, all of them were planted mostly by the lords of the flame, which are known in biblical terminology by thrones, the cherubim and seraphim. Again, we're just use this as hearsay, if you like. You can consider it a great big gigantic fairy tale. The mystery wisdom, and like in India they had different names for them, in Egypt they had different names for them, but the basic ideas are all the same. This is closer to what Tycho de Brahe would have named them all, and probably did. And probably in the Western world he had the most elaborate angelology of anyone for all of the planets and stars and everything else. He was quite developed. But what these beings did, the lords of the flame, the cherubim and the seraphim, they planted germs and potentials. That is, they planted, like for example, the capability of taking on a form, or the capability of willing. And that's all the further they could go. They could not interfere any further because of their own responsibilities. Their creative nature was so profound, and their love and their ability to radiate. In effect, what this is like, you might say, a super type of cloning. Because it's a cloning that is not just of an object, but of an ability, and not the ability itself, but the potential of that ability. Like if you take the ability to take on some kind of form, it's very, in some ways you can make a form, you can make a sphere, and you can metamorphize it, make a cone out of it, or a double cone, or something like that, and you can make all these metamorphoses of form using the same substance, but that's not the same as giving the germ for the stuff itself to take on the ability to take forms, and then to have that germ awaken through, in fact, taking on different forms. And so there is a radiation of character into the becoming beings. And so all that we are up to the present are physical, that is, the ability to take form and to work with it, our vital ability, the ability to grow and to transport experience from the physical into our inner consciousness in some sort of medium of exchange, and our ability to be motivated, that is, to have what is called the auric vehicle, that is made up of feeling, emotion, desire, passion, the ability to want to do things, all of these things were the potentials for them were radiated from the cherubim, the seraphim, and especially the lords of the flame. And they actually took us through enough experiences so that they began to wake up. Then relating in counterpoint the amount of experience that we had in resistance, because form is made by resistance, and the ability to take imagination or to take life from actually vitally growing and extending a form in space and keeping it going, awaken the life spirit, and finally the separation, as an animal is separated from the parent body, led to the concept of a separate individual being of self. All right, that's what these beings brought about. Then the work was carried on in the moon period as the cherubim, seraphim, and lords of flame withdrew. Then they allowed it to more journeymen beings, the lords of wisdom and the lords of individuality. In fact, the lords of individuality were right there when the potential for an individual selfhood was germinated in us. But there's a difference between these beings because they're not as highly evolved. Now, these beings, the first class, are so spiritually involved that they can only set up general conditions, and then they have to leave immediately because it would be meddling if they did stay around. The second order or class of beings are beings that can give germs or potentials of vehicles or of spiritual creative powers. And these beings also gave of themselves freely, but they could be more specific. This group of beings evolved. They needed the free creation to evolve. The other beings were, in order to, I don't know how to say it, in order to accomplish something so wonderful as to give the potentiality of the power of willing, that is the willingness to be at all. In order to be able to plant that, you have to be so free that you don't even need it for your own spiritual evolution. And that describes the kind of freedom of the first two classes. But the work that was carried on by the Lords of Wisdom and the Lords of Individuality, they still needed the creative experience for them to evolve themselves. And so there was some necessity, but they still did it freely. They could have not done it had they so chosen. They would have not evolved, but they could have not done it. So there was freedom, but there was a necessity for growth. Now, all of the beings that are involved in the period that we're talking about now, which is our current period of history, the fourth period, the Earth period, all of the beings that are involved here not only need to do their creative work to evolve, but they are committed and they are bound in order to fulfill a creative, I hate to use the word contract, but it's almost, it's more like something like the Olympics. Like diving. You set out to do this dive, and you can't go halfway through a dive and quit. You know what I mean? You set a motion in, and that motion has a fullness in it, and you're committed to that. Once you've sprung off the board, you're committed to doing it. And all of the beings, the lords of form, who are the basic, you might say, they are the basic guiding of all of our current evolution right now for all of the humans, animals, and plants. They are the overseers of this period. The lords of mind, which are in the Bible, Paul refers to them as powers. All of these are mentioned. They're slightly different when mentioned by Dionysius the Areopagite, that if you're familiar, they're mentioned in the Bible. In fact, there is, with the exception of the Xenophim and the Teraphim, all of these can be found in the Bible, but most people read them in the Bible and they just pass right over them. And I think that's a quaint name that still exists from Old English or something like that. So the lords of the mind are sometimes called powers, and among the Greeks they were sometimes called archai. And then we have the archangels, the angels, and finally humanity. And then trailing off behind humanity, we have the current animals, the plants, and the minerals. I would be tempted to say that the zodiac laps around itself and that the animals would be Aries and the plants would be Taurus and the minerals would be Gemini. But it's such a wild, purposeless speculation that it wouldn't do much of anything. So we have here, again, like we've been talking about 7 manifest principles and 5 abstracting principles or 5 assimilative principles. And so we have the 7 creative divinities, and we have the 5 beginning to be creators that are bound by necessity. And these 5 are the active, creative beings as far as the earth period is concerned. And some of the bottom class are not very creative. So you might say then that the earth period wherein we are evolving could just as well be called the Scorpio period, because it's a period of form. Oh boy, are you interested in a sideline? I'm interested in sidelines. All of these things can be related to different realms and worlds also, but it's a very unusual way. You might say that Pisces, I don't know, is related to the mineral earth. It always has been. Peter was always, Petra, and Peter among the disciples was always associated with Pisces. But the microcosmic earth, that is for us, our physical body, has always been associated with Virgo. Because the health of the physical body still is the 6th house to this day. The macrocosmic ethers, where all the electric intuitive qualities pass through, are associated with Aquarius. Whereas the microcosmic ethers, that is the etheric body, which often becomes the soul body when we develop through service an etheric richness, has been associated with Leo. In fact, in the Western world, all spiritual development, all occult development does not begin with the astral or desire body. It begins with the etheric body, because the desire body or astral body is so undeveloped that we can't use it as a really good vehicle in the inner worlds, because it's sort of like taking an infant or a fetus that's only about 5 or 6 months old and bringing it out into the world and hoping that it's going to live. It's just really not equipped for that. This is why, are you familiar with the labors of Heracles? The first labor of Heracles was to slay the Nemean lion, after which he always wore the lion's pelt, and it was impregnable. Like they could shoot arrows at him or do whatever you want. And this is, like the person who has the diamond-hard soul body from doing all of the loving service is invulnerable to magical attack or anything like that. The macrocosmic desire world is ruled by Capricorn, and the microcosmic desire body, developed in the moon period, is ruled by Cancer. So it's really quite interesting the way it all works out. The second act of Heracles was to slay the Lernaean Hydra, which is just like the principle of desire. Unless you get to the one desire that is the chief head of the Hydra, which is selfishness. You can get rid of all the other desires you want, and 7 others come in their place, just like that. And the cosmic mind is ruled by Sagittarius, and the individual mind is ruled by Gemini. Now, this in itself is quite interesting, the macrocosm-microcosm relationship. But if you look at it, the spiritual potential of being, of spirit existing at all at the dawn of the cosmos was ruled by Aries, and then the ability to take an individuality that focuses that is ruled by Libra on the microcosmic level. And the ability for there to be substance at all within the cosmic gel, you might say, for there to be a substance is ruled by Taurus, and then the ability to work with that substance and take forms out of it comes from the lords of form and from the formative type of consciousness in ourselves, which is associated with generative power. You might say the individuality is associated here with Libra, and the drive behind it being the Kundalini, or the sexual energy or the power being associated with Scorpio, are reflections of the basic creative principles of the dawn of creation. It's just a sideline. It's just kind of a fun thing. Obviously, we're going to have to race now. We're never going to get done everything we want to get done tonight. I'll have to start talking fast or something like that. Okay. So, in the beginning of the Earth period, again, we're saying that there are worlds of matter or form, and there is the time that is associated with spirit, and then there is the revolution of consciousness that we pass at varying types of time and periods of time through various different forms and formal conditions, and this is the way evolution goes. So we're saying that through the realms of the Earth period, the chemical region, the etheric region, the desire world, and the region of concrete mind, that we have been evolving through them all the time. If you're at all familiar with, I'm assuming that everybody's been with this class for several years, but this is what happens every life. We have our material world in the chemical region, and then we die and we go through a remembrance period where we remember in the ethers all of the experience of our previous life. We see our whole life backwards. Then we go through the desire world in a split way, and first we experience what is called purgatory, which is we rot, the same way our physical body rots, our desire body rots, and we rot away our negative desires and feelings and emotions, and that's called purgatory. And all of the essence of it goes into our spiritual being. And then we rot away all of our good deeds and all of the pleasant, loving things we did. And then we have, we relive our life again, and we understand the thought or the meaning behind all of our previous life. And then we take one little dip into chaos. And in that dip into chaos is when we see the purpose. Looking from the purely spiritual realms, we see the purpose behind it all. And then we come back to birth again, and we build the archetype, the thought of what our next life is going to be, and then we gather the desire material and the etheric material, and then we're born back into the physical plane, and we cycle through this again and again and again. So, in miniature, in every reincarnational cycle, we're living what the Earth is basically going through. We're saying that there have been a Saturn revolution in the Earth period, a Sun revolution, and a Moon revolution that have preceded our Earth evolution. But these diagrams are terrible, because what it really is, it's going in from the depths of our mind where we begin to think out into our motive feelings, and then into our ability to move and take life and energy, and then finally into a form like this, and then we withdraw back in. But this is to say that the whole of the solar cosmos, which is our ground of evolution, has gone into matter and back out, only the whole of the stuff of the matter wasn't even here. you might say that in the moon revolution of the Earth period, the Earth as we know it now wasn't even separated into a planet. It's the whole solar system was one big glob, and when it got into the chemical region, the chemical region has these subregions in it that are called gases, liquids, and solids. And then in the etheric, there's a hyper state here, which is called the chemical ether. And there's the light ether, and there's the reflecting ether. Different schools give light ether. And then the reflecting ether, and there are different schools give them different names again, but they all agree that they're there. And some people focus on more on one function of them and some on another. But this is to say that the last time around, the whole of the solar cosmos was no more dense than the liquids. And we still have 3 more revolutions, such that the next time after the Earth dissolves, this revolution is going to dissolve back into the etheric and the desire in the region of concrete thought, and then we'll have a rest again, and it'll come out again for the next revolution. The next time around, the physical Earth as a planet will be no more dense than liquids or than water. How are we doing on time, Laura? I should look at the... Do you have a 45 or a 60? A 90. Yes. You heard the story about the 3 bears? This is really turn the tapes off. About tales like that. These 3 polar bears were sitting on the ice, and it was winter and they didn't have anything else to do. And the father of the polar bear says, "I have a tale to tell," and tells this big long tale. The mother bear says, "I have a tale to tell," and she tells this big long story. And then he turned to the little baby bear and says, "My tale's told." All right. So we have to recapitulate. And recapitulation in spiritual things means not only just a review, but it means an anticipation. Because everything is new now, and after we've had the great cosmic sleep before the beginning of the Earth period, we've developed some new creative genius. And this new creative genius, we've got these new ideas, so we have to start all over again. You just can't add something on. It deals with one of the deepest mysteries. This has been my meditation for the last half a year. I'm almost neurotic about it, but and I'm not going to talk about the consequences of it yet because it's too early. But everything that is spiritual works from within. When you perceive with spiritual vision, you don't look like you look with your eyes because you're looking at something outside, and you have this whole hope that you can look at least from one perspective, or that you can subtend the whole thing and look from the outside in. When you're dealing with spiritual vision, you're seeing within something, and you see it from the inside out, and you don't see it in fragments, and you don't see it in part. You see it in whole. You see it in, it's there as a complete. And so that's the way things are. If remember now, in the Earth period, we're developing the ability to think, and therefore, previously, all we had was form, or form and life, that is the ability to grow, or the ability to move. Now we have a reason for moving, and we can understand the thinking process. So we had to recapitulate everything. And so in the Saturn revolution, of all of the different periods, is always when the form, it's like goes all the way back to the physical body, development of the physical body, it was all started all over again. And because we knew we were coming into the densest of all worlds, the physical body was built all over again to produce support. Support that it could stand on its own in the brittle chemical world rather than, it's kind of hard to squeeze a jellyfish or something like that and hurt it because it can just adapt itself. But if you're going to have a solid, brittle form, you have to have something that can support itself. Also, because we were going to be looking into the external world, we had to have a sense perception, and we had to have some way to transport that sense perception to a center of intelligence, and so a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system was developed. The potentialities were developed in the Saturn revolution, and finally there had to be a center of consciousness, and so the potential for a brain, for the mind to work through, was set into the body. But mind you, in this revolution, we got no thicker than a magnetic field in the Earth period. So like it was all basically a hypermatter that all of this was developed in. Then in the Sun revolution, we rebuilt the etheric body. But the etheric body was now in its third stage, not its fourth stage. It was in its third stage, so it was like an animal. And so the animal-like etheric body, for the first time now, has to support, and it has to be able to, out of the life itself, it has to form the physical stuff. It has to be the field wherein the particulate matter collects itself. So this is the first time that, so it's developing an independence in the same way the animal kingdom develops an individual independence. Plus the preservative quality, because everything in the material world, in the chemical, physical world, it's the world of the elements and things deteriorate, and therefore to perpetuate the form, the etheric body was built in such a way that preservation of the form, that's what it's really strange. If you think about our physical bodies are a form, and that form itself is evolving, and it's an interaction for all kinds of matter, like the liver regenerates just about every cell once every 6 weeks, I think, that the liver goes through regeneration. And every atom, with the exception of one in the physical body, changes every 7 years. But yet it's the same body, but yet it isn't the same body, because even the formative matrix of it has gone through an evolution, and there are things that you look at people, and those people have different features from the experience that the intelligence within has had. And so that preservative quality of the etheric body came out much more in this time. And we had to have a medium for the nervous system. The nervous system itself is just electrochemical, but the electrical part is itself in the ethers. And so in this recapitulation, in the etheric body, we developed the ability to carry sense perception into the inner body. And then in the moon revolution, we developed the desire body all over again, and something very strange happened. Remember that the desire body is now in a plant-like state, and plants differentiate themselves by being a pole. They all grow vertically toward the sun and toward the center of the earth. And the healthier the plant, for the most part, except those that are vines that are becoming or anticipating animal-like states, especially the mistletoe, which is another long side trip we could go into. I have to pass now because I'm about an hour behind time, and I don't want this to hang on too long. So there is this polarization, and so the attraction-repulsion, because there are so many different kinds of experiences. Because mind you now, in the external world, there are so many different kinds of experiences. In the inner worlds, one thing flows into another, and it's hard to separate things. It's like moods. It isn't a distinct break-off. It's like It's like one thing flows into another. But in the external world, there are so many varieties of things, and they're so discrete in relation to each other, and some of them are benign, and some of them are inimical. And therefore, we had to develop within the desire nature, just for pure survival, we had to have an attraction-repulsion mechanism so that we could desire some things and be repelled by other things and understand the pole of desire relative to experience and continued experience in the material condition. But something very unusual happened, because not only in the earth period do we develop the mind, but previously we had these three germs of spiritual potential that were sort of hovering around these three bodies that were reflections of, or that they were reflections of each other. And now the threefold spirit, through the mind, was going to be able to come into the bodies and awaken, so that the spirit could actually enter in and become aware of its creation, and so that all of the stuff of the external world and all of the different bodies and material conditions could be taken in directly into consciousness and immediately processed to understand the spiritual work. The meaning, why all of this is. But this is a tremendously slow process. For the spirit to come in and to wake up is tremendously slow. Even us who are slightly awake already and know what's going on find that, you can work for years and you say, how can I have been so down? I'm awake now, and then a year later you say, oh my goodness, how can I have been so sleepy for an entire year and I'm now awake again? This is a tremendously slow process. So something happened that there was under the guidance of the various spiritual hierarchies, mostly the archangels and angels, in the moon revolution, the desire body or the astral body was stratified, and it caused a split. And the part of the desire body that is associated with what Aristotle would have called animus mundi, the soul of the world, the thing that is associated with basic animative processes, became associated with the vital body and physical, and it became being almost unto itself. Whereas the type of desire body that is the higher part of it, that is more associated with feelings of art or fellow feelings and such like that, it was stratified away and it coalesced to the mind. And with the being coalesced to the mind, it produced a mirror of the spiritual self, and this mirror, it's sometimes called the second self, it's sometimes called the lower nature, it is sometimes called the I don't know, I'm forgetting terms because I'm thinking and I'm not remembering. It's hard to be both believers at the same time. Mnemonists can't think and thinkers can't mnemonize unless you can switch back and forth between poles, and it's a difficult thing to do. So there was this polarization of the desire body, so that we have this lower nature, this second self, this personal ego, which is sort of a reflection of the divine self, which works from the region of ideational thought, which is coming in. And the purpose for all of this is, it's really beautiful the way all of this works out. The purpose was that once the spiritual self started moving into its bodies and started awakening, then it is self-responsible. And then it can no longer be led willy-nilly by the gods. And therefore it's free. But in its freedom, because it's such a slow process, it could destroy its ability to continue onward because it's not completely awake yet. So the personal ego functioned sort of as a creation of a being all on its own, and it had what we might call instinctive function. And this instinctive function was self-preservative until the true self could come in. Ultimately, what it will be is that the second self will be associated with the personality, and it will have all kinds of material experience from all of the phenomenal worlds, but it won't have the meanings, and it'll form questions. And the true or spiritual self will be from the world of meaning, but it won't have the phenomenal experience. It's very much like what Meister Eckhart says, God needs me as much as I need God. And ultimately, what is now a struggle between the higher and lower selves will be a dialogue. And it'll be like question and answer, or it'll be fact and theory. And it will go both directions. But right now, the instinctive function has been strong, but the instinctive function now has taken on a different meaning, because now we know how to take care of ourselves. Now it is a resistance so that the will of the spirit can become strong in fighting and taming its partner in the lower nature. And finally, we have in the earth period, we have the birth of the mind, and the birth of the mind is the mind is in its mineral-like state, and it goes just back to like we were back in the Saturn period. We were basically a focus, and we were like like we were individual foci, but as individual foci, we were collected together. All of us that are now humanity were collected together, and we all made forms together, the same way it is with the atoms in the earth right now in the mineral kingdom. So, okay, that's what the recapitulative work has been up until the... This is... I'm very sorry about this. I always say I'm not going to try to say too much, and that has been the recapitulatory work until where we are now. So, as I mentioned last time, we as human beings are the place markers for evolution. We were minerals in the mineral-like state when the Earth was in its first stage. And now we reach our self-consciousness when the Earth reaches its nadir of concentration. Now all of the bodies for the first time are in standard position. Our physical body is in the chemical region. Our etheric body is in the etheric region. And so we are a cosmic standard. That if we understand our physical body now, we understand the physical nature of the entire cosmos, which we couldn't have at any other time, because in the moon period that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, or last week or something like that, or 2 weeks ago, we meet every other week. In the moon period, our physical bodies were only etheric. And they hadn't come to their fullness, and now they have come to their fourth or their completed state, after which they're going to go into decadence, which is going to be a lot. The whole last half of this class is going to be decadence. A very special kind of decadence. It's something that we go to all this trouble to make these bodies just so that they can give us trouble and fall apart on us. And then we have to salvage out of them what we can. That's basically what's saying, like the whole of evolution is before us. Right now, our introduction to it is in the form of illness, which is a rather rude introduction, but that's what you get if you intentionally go against the grain of things. And what have been a pleasant decadence and a freedom becomes a painful decadence because we clung too hard, then the letting go gets too hard also. So at any rate, we're all in standard position. And all of our consciousness, primarily, until we bring the spiritual self in, which is a voluntary action, you cannot receive what the Christians call the baptism by the Holy Spirit unless you seek it. You cannot even receive the deeper baptism by the Christ, which is called different things in different parts of the world, unless you ask for it. And the asking for it is an intentional activity. And so for the most part, almost all of us are, we can say, we are cock of the roost. We represent the first fruits of the cosmos. And we could almost say that in our isolation or our quarantine or in our exile in the phenomenal realms, that we are the greatest thing in evolution because we represent the whole of this evolution right now. But also the spiritual part of our being, I don't like to use the word part, but the spiritual attributes of our being are also in standard position. They have not withdrawn into the higher spiritual realms yet, which lead to greater unification with the divine and divine duty and such like that, which are other things we're going to be talking about much later on. So that when we understand ourselves in spirit, we understand the basic fundamental powers. So we are in a standard position, and it's a very special standard position. And when we have a spiritual awakening, we understand the spirit as it was intended to be. All right. Now we're all set for the second half of tonight, which I'm going to really whip through very fast. He shakes his head. We're only halfway. I'm trying to, this is still a recapitulation yet. All right. It's time to talk about rest again. We've talked several times about rest. And we've said that rest, that between every period of manifestation, every sub-period and every sub-sub-period, every sub-sub-sub-period is rest. So that it turns out that the rest periods turn out to be something like between 93 and 96% of the creative activity. But the rest periods, it's like sleep researchers think now, that the depth of rest varies. That as we become more involved in matter, it's like passing a car on a 2-lane highway. That when you pull out, you make your judgment before you pull out to go around the car. You judge what the oncoming traffic is, what speed it's going at, and how distant it is, and whether you can safely pull out around that car and pull back into the right lane again. You don't make, when you've made your judgment and you're out alongside the car, basically you can either go forward or back. When you've made your judgment, you go forward and you do it. You complete your action. And the cosmos is like that also. So that when we're in the depth of what you might call God's concentration, when the concentration is such that the imagination of the cosmos is slowed down to an almost stopped position, which is where the world looks like right now to us, when you're that deep into your manifest activity, the rests that you take are much shallower rests. Because you don't want to have a backseat driver telling you, hey, you can't be pulling out around. You're not going to make it. I had that happen to me once. I was pulling out to pass a car, and I'm out there in that lane, and somebody yells at me, you can't pass this car right now. And I slammed on the brakes. I pulled off to the side of the highway, and I refused to drive another foot. Like, if you take my judgment, you take my judgment. If you don't, you don't. It's sort of like that. And in effect, if the rests were too deep in the manifestation period, they would be like a backseat driver, and they would be inhibiting. So the rests that we have in between revolutions are much milder than the rests that we have. It's like the difference. Like we have the Earth rests between winter and summer. The winter is a gigantic rest. but so is night a rest. But the rest of night is much smaller and much less deep than the rest of winter, because obviously the ethers don't withdraw back into the earth and the leaves fall and such like that. And that's a big rest, what winter is. And so the same thing is like this when we're talking about the cosmos, that there is this rest, and then we come out of the rest into what is called the Earth revolution of the Earth period. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So this is the most Earth of all, and it's the deepest of all times in matter, and it is the times that we live in now. And so we're beginning to describe the rough of it. And now some unusual things happen. There are three purposes to creation. One is, at least from the viewpoint of human beings, one of the primary purposes is to develop soul power. This is the stuff of experience that, petty magicians and sorcerers and stuff like to play games with. Actually, it's there for a much bigger purpose of creation, which I don't think I'm capable of describing. Then, in order to utilize the soul power, or even to develop the soul power, one develops a creative mind. And the modus operandi for both of these is through the big word, the big E word, you might say, experience. When the cosmos is most ripe, we can garner the most experience. And we can garner it in such a way that it is discrete and individual. With the mineral focus of our mind and the very nascent beginnings of our spiritual awakening, our spiritual intelligence, we start at the bottom. And it's important to see that this is a rectangle first, before we can look at all of the other dimensions of it. And seeing this as a rectangle allows us to geometrically understand this, or to geometrically measure this. This is a discrete experience. And when we can measure it, and when we can geometrically apprehend it in our inner consciousness, we have one understanding of the reality of it. And that understanding, though it is not the complete understanding, is very objective. We can know it, we can prove it, we can test it, we can recreate it. And that is what the experience is like in the material world. We get many separate, discrete, very objective, measurable experiences. But as many different kinds as we can. See, because the spiritual worlds, there is so much, I don't know how to say it, from so many points of view that we can understand that for our human consciousness as it is now, we have to have many, many discrete experiences to get the hint of what the spiritual consciousness is like. However, it is very important that we get these discrete experiences, because without them, we do not develop an objectivity. And then when the earth and such goes into decadence and we return back into the spiritual worlds, we will not understand and appreciate, and we will not be able to harvest and reap the creative purpose of each of the spiritual worlds. And so therefore we have to take the same objectivity that we develop by more, like I've bumped into a few light posts in my day by walking around in a dream. I was sort of like a Lemurian yet, and I hadn't wakened up to the external world of You walk into a light post once and you really wake up to the fact that it's there. When you have experiences like that and you have an objective knowledge of them, then you can sort of, I don't know how to say it, you can polish the spiritual worlds. The intelligence, because we are this special standard of the cosmos, we are this special shuttlecock, because we are the only beings that have self-consciousness, spiritual waking self-consciousness in the external world. We are the only beings in this entire solar cosmos that are going to be able to take the external objectivity and apply it to all of the spiritual worlds, and a very heavy responsibility rests on us. So that if somebody says, don't be involved with matter because that's all maya, that's all illusion, that is someone that is, I would say, profane or blasphemous in appreciation of all of the trouble of creation to have produced this differential world. So what I'm trying to get to, probably saying way, way, way too much, what I'm trying to get to is the fact that we're here to have differential experience. And so that's what we're leading up to. Now, you go something way, way back. I'm going to pull a jump on you because we have to go fast. We're never going to get done what we need to get done, and we'll have an incomplete view of the cosmos that would be looking only like at this side of the eraser, and you couldn't see the dirty side, which is actually white, which is much more spiritual like, if you're into that kind of humbug. What we're trying, so we're going to have to move along quickly. If you remember, when we talked about conscious being within the absolute, that one was differentiated within the potential, that one was born within zero, and that realization of self versus potential or non-self produced a polarization that led to two. And the realization of that two, or the focus of that two, led to a consciousness of Trinity. And that again reflected itself off of the being, non-being, and that led to a hexagonal consciousness with a central focus. And we said that the reflection of manifest being versus the spiritual state between the unmanifest and unspeakable unknown, and the manifest reality was the threefold awakening of spirit. This is going very, very fast. And the focus of all of that led to what we call the divine seven. And that manifest completion is associated with the number 7, whether it's the 7 spectral colors or the 7 divine creative beings. Now the same thing happens in macrocosm and in microcosm in the Earth period. That if we are to have diversified experience, this diversified experience is not unpatterned. It follows, it can't be anything other than its creator. And the mathematical logic of the mind of God, or of the absolute, is septenary in its self-realization through manifest completion. Therefore, our experiences, even in the material world, are septenary. So there is something, in the same way that we've had these 7 periods of time and these 7 globes or states of matter and these 7 realms or worlds that they're in and these 7 revolutions of consciousness, and we're going to run into all of these sorts of things, all of humanity is within the balance of the consciousness of God, divided into 7. I don't know that it's arbitrary, but I do know it's universal. I know that if you look at the stars in the heavens and look at them under a telescope, you will find that the 7 colors are there. There's red stars and there's orange stars. Our sun happens to be an orange star, and some people claim it was born from Arcturus, that it was a planet when Arcturus was in an earlier sun state, and that's why they're both orange. I don't know. There are a lot of interesting things like that. But they are 7 colored. And these are called 7 rays. I'm not going to go into it extensively at this moment. It's like saying that there are 7 types of people that have 7 different parent stars. And the outlook of each of them is different. It's analogous to the signs of the zodiac, such that each sign of the zodiac is complete, but each sign of the zodiac has a specific bias, such that Aries and Mars have a red bias, and that the character of the red is a driving kind of action, and that doesn't mean to say that someone who has a martial parent star is necessarily going to only be an action person and not be thoughtful or contemplative or beauty-minded or anything like that, but there will be an outlook that is more slanted in that way. Exactly how and when the differentiation into 7 rays of human beings took place, we're not going to discuss that right now. In fact, this has nothing to do with the horoscope, because you can't tell from a horoscope what the parent star of someone is. You have to follow someone back all the way through all of their lives to see the tone that is through all of their lives, and to see the differential experience that most likely occurred in an area which we're going to be talking about next week, or the next time we meet. Yeah, this will be the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so we don't have to wait 2 weeks, yeah. So only the Thursday class. I don't know, I might even offer the Thursday class on Thanksgiving just to see who's Laura says, no, I'm just going to see who's dedicated to learning or not, who's willing enough to be a fanatic. We'll break for Thanksgiving in the Thursday class. So we're talking now about a purposeful, organized differentiation. And so that we can each have different kinds of we can each have different kinds of experience according to our need. And in order to do this, 7 states of matter were developed to begin with, and 7 foci of matter were developed. They are associated with planets. All of us within our own being, in our etheric being, we have different centers that are associated with neural plexes. And there is an action that is both in the etheric and in the physical. In the physical is where the neural activity that allows our physical existence to go on, where it is centered. In the etheric, there is a corresponding action that is much more psychological. That is, these places are called chakras. I don't want to go into that. It's a much bigger subject than we possibly have time for. But also, in our desire nature, in our auric being, in our desire body, there are not organs, but there are what will eventually be something like organs. They are like vortices, like whirlpools. In people who are negative, or who are animal-like, they spin backwards. They spin in a different direction. They spin this way. Like the worlds, when you see them from without, look like they go like this into a center. Like this into a center. Or like this into a center. If a person is forward going and meets the challenges of life, they turn this way. We're talking about something here that we're talking about a consciousness. There are two attributes to this. There is the direction of the spin and the speed of the spin. We all hear about vibrations, and we all know that it is the same stuff. It's cosmic root stuff, and it's according to the intelligent focus of the divine and the concentration of the divine that differentiates between the different planes of matter. That when we were talking about the experience of form, when we rested on it and then went deeper into our concentration, or when God went deeper into the concentration, when we remembered these different forms and saw the metamorphosis of forms, we saw them as life and the ability to grow. And then when we rested again and came out deeper in our concentration, we were able to then, after seeing a living, growing form, we were able to separate it off so it could be mobile and motivate itself to go wherever it would. Now, in the same way, the consciousness of the divine was actually creating the worlds. Like the physical world wasn't here back in the Saturn, Sun, and Moon periods, because the logic in the conscious mind of the divine had not taken that step, that resolution yet. You know how it's like in a meditation when you understand that something is true, and then you understand that something else is true, and then something else is true. Like it's not just a linear sequence, but it's more and more complete. It is deeper. It is more fundamental. That is what the concentration of the divine is like. It creates the different worlds, and it creates the evolution within those worlds, which allows for the possibility of all of the different beings, the cherubim and seraphim and such like that, to evolve within that possibility. And what we're talking about now is how that manifests in the earth plane. And so there are two things to be taken into account here. That this concentration, I don't know how, I don't want to stick my nose into something that's not my business. But you know that when you go deeper and deeper into a prayer or into a concentration or something like that, you set things spinning inside of yourself. I grew up back in the days when we had our tonsils out or something like that. They gave us ether. And all of the kids told all the other kids just before they were going to have their tonsils out, when they give you the ether, be sure to look for the whirlpool. You know what I'm talking about? You'll see the whirlpool in the center of your forehead, or you'll see it, and then just there, right before you go to sleep. And everybody looked for the whirlpool, and everybody saw it. The same is true, that if we go deeper and deeper into concentration, there is a spin which has one direction, or if we're withdrawing consciousness, it goes a different direction, and there is the speed of the spin. So there is the direction and there is the speed. Memory work or withdrawal work produces a different direction, and sometimes the directions may be coterminous, and the deeper, and like forward-going concentrative work produces a different direction. Some people use this in a very malicious way. When they want to overpower people by hypnosis, they count backwards and you draw the person right out of the body. Or when they want to bring them back in, they count forwards and the person spins right in. This is, the three attributes of spirit. Like for example, in the Orient, Brahma is the power of causing things to be. Vishnu is the one that holds it all together with the loving force, but the one that sets things spinning is Shiv, the dancer. It's the spinner, the whirler of the whirling dervishes. And so you notice when you go into your concentrations or your meditations, like you actually do see a pinwheel, and then it actually begins to form into a focus of light, and it becomes clearer and clearer until literally you can see. Sometimes you see graphic objects like this, but you can actually see things of more spiritual realms which have different types of dimensions. The same thing happens in the cosmos. And if you're laying prone on your back, probably with your head north, and you're in a deep meditation, and you're on the verge of leaving your body, you feel at different places in your astral body, you feel these vortices, and they seem like they're pointing in a different direction, each one in a different direction. And so like, if you're not used to it, you better have been that's what your meditation is for, is to wake you up and to make you clear. It seems like you're pulling in different dimensions all at the same time through different spirals and vortices, and you lift yourself right out of your body. But that's not the important part. The important part is that you're aware of these different dimensions and that your general intelligence has different foci, but that by working on the center of intelligence, each of these vortices starts spinning, and each of them comes into its value of its own, and it makes for a complete you. It's sort of like the tuning of a symphony when you hear a tone roll, like first one tone and then all of the harmonics on down the line until there is a complete you, but all of it is keyed to the keynote that is your individual being. And then there is sort of like a wholeness and an objectivity. And this is precisely the way it works in the divine. And this is the way the solar cosmos came into being. And so this produces something really interesting. It produces, at the different vortices, a different qualitative value for each vortice. But yet, there is, because of material limitation, these vortices are strung out in the string such that some are relative to the center spinning more distantly than others, and because of the limitations of matter, so that you have not only a qualitative difference in kind, like according to the 7 colors, but that you also have a differentiation in degree of manifest completion or perfection.